with Mama Says Namaste.
Welcome to the Mama Says Namaste podcast with a special guest interview. I love adding these interviews in from people that speak to me, have been great opportunities for me to learn and grow in my own parenting and share the message with all of you. So as you know, whenever I do a guest interview with someone, not only do you have the audio version of this on the podcast, but you also have a blog that goes along with it and video. So you can also check it out on YouTube and get to see the face of my special guest. So this week I have Kimball Lewis with me, and he is a child behavior improvement expert with years of experience working with parents who are desperate to improve their child's behavior. And he's the father of 2 teenage sons that he homeschools. So I'm thrilled to have him join me today and for us to really talk about some of the maybe behavior issues you're having in your home and how to better connect with our kids. So Kimball, I welcome. Thank you for joining me today. And I'd love for you to just share a little bit of your story. Yes. How did you become a child behavior improvement expert, and kind of what does that look like for you?
So first of all, Ashley, thanks for having me. This is fun to be on this. And I've been at this for about 6 years now as CEO of EmpoweringParents.com. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm the father of 2 teenage, well, actually one of them's 20 now. My wife and I raised 2 boys, and we homeschooled from about sixth grade on. And I've always been sort of a self-help junkie. And prior to this life, I lived in the world of technology and healthcare. And then even before that, I was a social science researcher doing healthcare and child welfare issues for a think tank. That's sort of where my career started. But I had this opportunity to take sort of my technology expertise and then my role as parenting and merge those together because EmpoweringParents.com, which is our website and where all of our work comes from, had an opportunity for a technologist to come in and someone who's very interested in all the parenting issues to come in to sort of transform the company. We sell something called the Total Transformation Program. That's our key product for parents. So, we describe it as the instruction manual for parents who have kids with behavior problems. And that's how our company works. And you subscribe to it. It used to be books and DVDs about 10 years ago, and it was developed by a man named James Lehman. So I've brought all of it online, and I've become the person who evangelizes James Lehman's approach to this. James Lehman became wildly popular in the late 2000s and passed away suddenly. And the company kind of floundered after that, and it was going to get close to shutting its doors down. And I had the opportunity to come and save his message because I actually had used the Total Transformation Program, was familiar with it, and I'm a huge proponent of it. And just saw this was a way. And I had a point in my career where I change direction, where we could make sure that this thing lives on because it's an incredible resource for parents. So that's where we are today. And I spend a lot of my time evangelizing the key concepts in the Total Transformation Program on how to deal with your child's behavior problems.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's dive straight into this. And when it comes to behavior problems, of course, there are 2 aspects. There's the parent who is going, "Oh my gosh, I'm right in the thick of it," or "I feel like I've already lost my child." And then there's also those parents that are listening that are thinking, "Well, I don't want to have that. I've got a perfectly happy, compliant, well, let's see, compliant. I was going to say 3-year-old, but I know that my 3-year-olds were not necessarily the most compliant. But, maybe they're in this position where they're at the beginning of this. I mean, if you are just starting to notice your child acting out, or if you are fearful that, you don't want to get into this, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, what are some basic strategies to keep from going downhill, and what are some common pitfalls that parents do fall into sometimes in early parenting?
Yeah. So one of the things we point out to parents is that most acting out occurs as a problem-solving technique for the child. They have a problem. And the problem is not a math problem. It's a problem is something like anger. We all get angry, and it never goes away. Your entire life, you're going to get angry. And the problem solving aspect is that how do you deal with the anger that comes? What are effective ways to deal with anger? What are effective ways of dealing with frustration? What are effective ways of dealing when someone else is bothering you? Do you hit them? Do you scream? Do you act out? Or do you figure out a more productive way of dealing with that problem? and there are some functional issues too. Like, what are effective ways of getting your work done before going off and playing? Like, we all have, today I struggle with that. How do you make sure that you're prioritizing getting your work done when you don't feel like doing your work?
Uh-huh.
For a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, that's the first time they're confronting these problems. They've been taken care of the first few years. So as they hit, younger child, and then as they go into adolescence, they're facing more and more problems that fall into those categories that they have to solve. And one of their go-to problem-solving techniques is to act out.
Uh-huh.
And we've all seen this happen. And the reason they act out is because it works. So if a child is frustrated and they start yelling and screaming and getting all, acting out, the parent often comes in and fixes the problem for them. And then like, oh, well, that worked. I acted out and the problem got fixed. And it happens like that. So even like with chores, somewhat older kids, if you're fighting with your kids every day about chores, at some point, and the kid fights back a lot, at some point, you're going to come home and just be like, I'm just exhausted. I do not want to get into another fight with my child. Mm-hmm. And then you're just like, it's going to be easier if I just do the dishes myself instead of having yet another fight. That acting out actually worked for the child. Now it's not an effective problem solving skill, but it does solve problems with parents. Mm-hmm. And the trouble that we see is that, most kids, I'm going to call the easy, I'm going to say it's most kids, but some kids are just easy. Some kids figure out on their own how to solve these problems. Other kids don't. They go to this, they develop patterns of behavior where they just keep going back to the acting out to solve the problem. And then as they get older, as they get into adolescence, as they get into early adulthood, the problems that they face become way more complex social interactions, responsibilities, and other things. And if their go-to solution to solving those problems is to act out, then they have to act out a lot and often and in every aspect of their life, and things do not work well for them. So the earlier you can recognize that your child is not solving their problems effectively, and that you coach them into better problem-solving skills, that the better off you're going to be. That being said, you can turn it around if it's later in it. We see turnarounds all the time. That's why parents come to us, because they probably didn't catch it early enough. Uh-huh. And we help them into that. Or some kids are going to struggle no matter what. Like, some kids are just hard. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so we're there to help parents. Like, this is how you teach them to better problem solve, and here's how you handle it when they revert back to their old ways or continually to do, the acting out behavior. Here's how you handle it.
I love that. And that it relates even to the podcast episode from the week before, where I was addressing, our different learning styles for kids. And sometimes we'll see this lack of motivation, and we go to, you're not doing your homework, you're not cleaning your room, and it has nothing to do with that. It's what's underlying. Where are they struggling with their security, with their feeling like they are out of control, and different things like that? What's the deeper issue that's going on? So I love how you have framed that, why do kids act out? Well, kids are acting out because they're looking for that problem solving solution. And we as parents have an opportunity and a responsibility to provide our children, not with every answer, but with tools to help navigate life. And yes, acting out when that's the only option is easy. When you have an array of options, it's a lot easier for us to actually step into our parenting role when we have given them other resources to be able to figure out how to problem solve.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one of the ways they act out is they argue with you. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a problem solving skill, because the arguing drags you down to their level. And now they can actually get out of their responsibilities to get out of those other things. And we tell parents one of the way to address this is to not attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to attend those arguments. If your child wants to start arguing and fighting with you about something, you don't have to. Particularly if they're doing it over and over again, it's a pattern of behavior, and this is how they're approaching their problems. You can RSVP no to the argument and just step away from it. You don't have to yell or scream. You just say, like, no, I'm not going to argue with you about this.
Oh, and I can hear people arguing right now and with attachment parenting and being there for our children, but we need to let them know that they're heard, right? So yes. Don't we just show up and let them? We have to hear them out, right?
Once or twice, but so we have this thing, which is you can explain yourself once and move on. If your child is asking you, why is this rule in place, for the 100th time, and you've explained it to them, they're no longer interested in why the rule is in place. They're interested in dragging you into the fight to get you to not let the rule apply to them anymore. That's the issue. So we have this explain yourself once and move on, and be realistic with parents. They may not be mature enough to understand why you don't let them stay out past a certain hour, or they may not be mature enough and can't understand why you set certain rules and boundaries that they don't like at this age. And our goal is you want to expand those. You want them to be independent in the long run. But to spend week after week after week and day after day of arguing about the same thing over and over again, you don't have to tend those arguments. You owe it to your child to explain it to them, but you don't owe it to them to understand. It's up to them. And they may not understand. They may not be willing to understand. They may understand, and they may be arguing because the arguing is the point, not their lack of understanding or their maturity. They just might not be there.
Oh, that's such a great insight and reminder for parents. I oftentimes encourage everyone to, the more a child understands the why behind it, the more they are going to align with it, and they will. But to your point, yeah, sometimes they're either not there or they're choosing not to because they want to just argue or anything else. And I know I have personally experienced this in my household with my some of my children who love to get into a debate, and I do too. And then we end up in a battle of wills with who's going to have the last word. And so yeah, just giving permission to step away. And sometimes it's not taking, what I'm saying with getting kids to the why. It's not that every conversation has to be that.
There's one thing I want to add, and this is the approach that we take, because sometimes it's hard to tell, like, is it really, should I be discussing this? You want your kids to be on the same page. So what we recommend is at the time that there's a rule or responsibility they're supposed to be doing, they don't want to do it. At the time, and they know what the rule is. At the time they start to argue about it, you say, no. You have a responsibility. You have to do it. Tomorrow at 5:00, we will meet at the table when things are calm and we'll discuss it. But right now is not the time. Now you have to whatever, but tomorrow we'll schedule time and we'll talk through it.
Oh, wow. What a responsibility shift.
But only if you talk to me nicely.
Yeah.
No yelling, no swearing. We talk to each other and we'll just talk through the rule. They very often, they don't want to show up at that meeting at 5:00 tomorrow because that's not the point. But that's how you find out if it's the point, and you can listen to them. And it's perfectly fair to say, look, I'll take that under consideration. And if you're able to follow these rules or whatever, for the next 3 weeks in a row, and you can show that you're responsible, then we'll give you more responsibility or we'll relax things or whatever.
Oh, I love that, because it does kind of shift the responsibility to them as well, that, okay, you can argue and you're going to argue with a rational mind and you're going to show up prepared for this discussion, not in the heat of the moment. I mean, that's a powerful and effective tool that we need to be giving our children anyway, is that, no, we don't argue in the heat of the moment when our emotions may push us to words we may regret or anything else. We're going to do it. And I'm inviting you. So it's not, I'm shutting down your voice. I'm inviting you to show up with maturity. If you're going to you could hold your stance then. And
if you have a fairly mature child anyway, see, that's not who comes to us. The parents that are coming to us are generally parents that are at their wits' end. I mean, they've just been in a battle for a long time with their child, or a long time could be 6 months, because a child could be like things no problem at all, and then they hit adolescence, and then within like a week they change. And then everything seems different, and there's some biological reasons, there's all sorts of reasons behind that, but you can, it's perfectly fine to reason with a child, and it makes sense for a child that desires to be reasonable. But they may not. That may not be the point. So we point that out to parents. This is part of the key of recognizing. The guy James Lehman, who came up with these programs that we talk about, he was a defiant child. He spent the early part of his life in prison. Like, he knew all this stuff. He finally was he was 25 years old, and he went before a judge, and he was going to get a fairly long prison sentence. And the judge said to him, look, this is your last chance. I'm going to put you into this accountability-based program. It's a new program. And if you get through it successfully, you won't go to prison. Otherwise, you go to prison. And he went through the program. It changed his life. And then he went on to Fordham University and Boston University. He got his master's in social work and he became a counselor, and he worked with defiant kids for 30 years. And he was so good at, the reason he was able to articulate all this stuff so well is he was that kid. So when they're talking to him about this defiance and this other stuff and whatever, like he was that child at that time. So he knows when it's manipulation. He knows what their issues are. He knows when it's like the transformation that he went through. So they're not like putting one over his eye. So he understands what's going on, especially with kids that are challenging. These kids, and some kids are challenging. And it's not mom and dad's fault if the kid's challenging, because we have so many customers that come to us that have 2 kids that were perfectly fine. And the third one is just really hard. And it's not like the parents decided to parent 2 parents the same and then just had a completely different parenting style with the third child. The third child is just different, and they're just more challenging. So.
Oh man. Okay. First off, what a testament to restorative justice, just the story for him to have been able to, get enough, not only shifting his own life around, but the impact and the ripple effect that he's had since then is amazing. I want you to talk a little bit more about that because that is something where, when I first was looking through some questions and talking points that you had, and I saw in there, parents are not to blame. Huh? Wait, but isn't it all our parenting that does this, right?
No, well,
please elaborate here. Because
no, we have, and I'm gonna say we, but I'm evangelizing James Lehman's total transformation concepts. And one of them is you're not to blame for your child's behavior. Don't take responsibility for your child's behavior. This is as a practical matter, don't take responsibility. Because if you keep doing that, your child will figure out after a while that you're taking responsibility for their behavior. And now they're absolved. They're not accountable anymore. You are.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And so they can manipulate that way. And even worse, if they use it to manipulate you, what's even worse is if they believe it. If the child believes that they can't behave well because of mom or dad, then they think they're ruined because of mom and dad, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's not effective. It doesn't work. There's only one person who can change your child's behavior, and that's your child. We can influence it. We can coach them. We can do all sorts of stuff, but you can't change your child's behavior any more than you can go to the gym, exercise, and work out and think that somehow that's going to make your child get into shape. Only your child can do that, right?
Wow.
Your child. Yeah. And if you could change your child's behavior, for the parents that come to us, we tell them it would have changed already, because gosh, you want your child's behavior changed. Like you've been trying and you can't. Like it's up to your child to change their behavior. It's up to the parent to be as effective as possible to give your child the tools to change their own behavior, but they have to use the tools. So that they're a big part of this. The child is, and the parent. So don't blame yourself for their behavior. You got to let go of that guilt and just say, from this point forward, I want to be an effective parent. And I want to teach as best I can my child to learn how to behave, but the child has to do the learning.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, that's such a shift. It's not to say that, we don't pay attention to, the examples we may be setting in our home or where our children may have learned patterns, but us correcting those patterns, fixing them, or, trying to go over, it does our children a disservice. It doesn't allow them to step into their own responsibility. And I love how you had stated that. I was reading it in one of your things, just even about, if your child gets in trouble in school, you don't take responsibility. I'm sorry, my child acted out. It's more, let me step in with you to help my child with accountability.
I see this all the time with, and this is a little bit controversial, but I can tell you where our stand is on this. And I see this all the time coming across, like in Facebook and social media, where some kid does something not well at school, and a parent will weigh in and say, we need to hold their parents accountable. And we would say, no, you need to hold the child accountable. Because again, the child's going to learn that if they do something wrong and their parents held accountable, that somehow that it's not up to them. It's up to the parent. Like if the kids are going to learn this, they have to be the ones that are held accountable for it.
Yes. So, I love that. Okay. So on that note, then, for this accountability, what is your number one rule for giving consequences? How do you keep your children accountable? I mean, is it typical thing? I'm going to take for teens. I'm going to take their phone away and I'm going to ground them. That's how you do for everything, correct?
It's not everything.
Okay, so what is your number one rule for consequences?
Okay, so if you've ever subscribed to our newsletter, you'll know, because in our newsletter we every couple of weeks we send out actually it's once a month, we send out a mailing that says the number one rule for consequences. And when you open up the email, it says you can't punish your child into good behavior. And that's not the point of consequences. The point of consequences are to show your child that when they do something, there is a consequence. And often it's a natural consequence, but if it's not quite natural, the parents have to figure out one that's effective. But the idea is the consequence teaches them that behavior is not effective. It doesn't work for them.
Yes.
So going back to the problem solving, the reason a lot of these kids are acting out is that it's to solve a problem that they have, and it works for them. So consequences start to turn that around. So when they act out, if they don't get rewarded somehow for it by being, for example, absolved of having to do chores, if there's a consequence instead, then they learn that behavior doesn't work anymore. So the consequence is helping them learn that the acting out doesn't work for them anymore. So you want to make sure that the destructive behaviors that hurt other people and are abusive no longer work for them. They're not effective for them. And then at the same time, you coach them. So there's two aspects to our program. One is effective consequences to make sure that those bad behaviors don't work, and then coaching them as to what the good behaviors are. But to get specific on consequences, I always like to give parents at least a couple of quick takeaways.
Well, yes, because I get a lot, because we talk a lot about natural consequences. And what I get is parents going, well, what's a natural consequence for this? I don't have any idea. So how do I figure out what a consequence is? It's just easier to ground them or take their phone away.
They're not all natural, but natural is great. The natural is if your child studies and fails, let them fail. Don't go in. Do not go in and try to get their grade changed. Let them fail.
Yes.
They failed. That's the consequence. If they throw their phone across the room out of frustration and break it, you do not buy them a new phone. They have to earn the money to get that phone back. If they break their controller because they get frustrated playing their video game, they don't get a new controller. They have to somehow wait till, they could wait till Christmas. They could wait till something, you know what I mean? But they don't get one back.
Whatever they need to do.
That's the natural consequence. When you break something that you own, it's broken now. Mm-hmm. And you've got to either fix it or you've got to come up with the money to fix it. So those are good natural consequences. But very often there are not obvious natural consequences. And so parents need to make sure they're using what we call effective consequences. And they tend to be short term. So you don't want to take your child's phone away for a week or a month, because that phone, these are patterns of behavior. Kids are doing these things over and over again. So when you apply a consequence, it doesn't always work the first time or the second or the third. It's consistency that matters, not the severity of the consequence. If you take their phone away for a week and they do something tomorrow, you've got nothing left to take away. If you bankrupt your kids through consequences, they have nothing left to lose. And so you don't have leverage anymore. So when we take their phone away, we want to take it away for a short term. And we typically want to have a task that they have to do in order to get their phone back. Uh-huh. So that's the two key things, is that your consequences are short term and they're task oriented. And then we just remind parents that consistency matters more than severity. You're just consistent over and over again. You want to do this so that they know that when they do X, Y happens. And then after a while, they'll be like, you know what? It's just not worth it anymore. I'm not going to do X. And so we can go over what some of the tasks are, but a good example is, a lot of parents come to us with their kids swear at them. Mm-hmm. I mean, they swear like the F word, right to mom, right? Looking in the eye, yelling at them. And we're like, well, what's the natural consequence for that? Like, how do you put a task involved in that? What we usually say is take away something of value to them, like their phone or electronics or something, or they're grounded for, maybe a day or a couple hours or whatever seems appropriate for that. But in addition, they have to complete a task. And the task that we recommend, you can get creative on this, but one we recommend is that they write a letter to you. Mm. And the letter says, to the effect, I understand that that swearing at mom is inappropriate and against the rules in this household, and that we do not swear at other family members in this household.
Mm-hmm.
So they're stating the rule of the household, which is very important, that you want to create a culture of accountability within your home. And so by writing that out, they're going to roll their eyes and they're going to think this is stupid, but you're clarifying that we have standards in this household. Those are the standards. And then in addition, you're going to have them write out, and you can coach them as to what this needs to be. What I'm going to do next time when I'm frustrated with mom, instead of swearing at her, I'm going to do X. So you're explaining the rule, and they're writing it down, and they're explaining what they're going to do next time.
Uh-huh.
And they're going to do it again, because these are patterns of behavior, and they're going to write the letter again. And then at some point it's going to sink in. And that's the task. They don't get their phone back till they've written this letter, and they're not going to take it seriously necessarily. They might roll their eyes, but you just make them do it to show that and you do it business-like. You don't have to like convince them of anything. You say, no, this is what you need to do. This is what I want you to do. And they will eventually write the letter because they want to get their phone back. Mm-hmm. We don't ask them to say they're sorry, because frankly, we don't believe they're sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not asking them
forced apologies here.
Yeah, we're not asking them to be sorry. What we're asking them is to understand there's a rule in this household. You can't swear at mom, or you can't swear at dad. You can't hit your sister. We don't do that in this household. That's the rule. And when you feel like you're at that stage where you want to do that, here's what you do instead. And you want to coach your child as to like what the alternative coping mechanisms are to avoid doing that thing. And it turns out to be very effective for the kids that are struggling, because now they've written out, they've got some clarification as to what's, you're reinforcing with your child what's appropriate within your household, which you have to keep doing with these kids that are continually acting out.
Right.
So.
Oh, I love that. So again, with natural consequences, we are talking about making sure that they are short-term, so that you don't completely rob the bank account of everything.
Exactly. Yep.
And also making sure that there is a task. And I love that opportunity, because what you just laid out in that task was their opportunity to course correct, to find the solution, to make things right. And I know that there are some kiddos where I've recognized they will continue to act out because they feel like they're at a loss and they can't make it right. So they're going to just keep going wrong and, or keep acting out in this way. And so giving them that opportunity to correct it, to right that wrong by writing a letter is such a beautiful opportunity as well.
And it also gives you the opportunity as a parent. And we stress this because, again, the parents coming to us have kids that are doing this over and over again. It's becoming a big problem. When they do the alternative behavior, which they will eventually try, and they'll test it out or whatever. And when they're successful at it, when you watch your child get frustrated with his sister and not hit her this time, but go do something else, point it out, recognize it. You want to make sure that you're recognizing that they've done the right thing, because these kids that are acting out, too often it's all negative. All you're doing is correcting them over and over again. And God forbid, like there's a lot to correct them on, especially with kids that are really struggling, because every day is a struggle. So you could just, from morning to night, you could be correcting them. But when they do something right, just point it out. And don't go over the top. Just be nice and businesslike about it. Just say, look, I really like the way you handled that when your sister you got frustrated with your sister. That's exactly what you want to do. Yep. And leave it at that, and walk away and let them think about that, and they'll kind of like that. So.
Oh yeah. How often do sometimes our children act out because of our lack of awareness in their lives? And if you want to correct it, it's super awareness, not just of what they're doing wrong, but what they're doing right.
They're doing right. So you can reinforce those behaviors. So, and then like there's other things that we talk about as well, which is like modeling behavior. Like if you don't want your kids to yell and scream, then as a parent, don't yell and scream. Mm-hmm. Like, because, and forgive yourself if you do, because we all do once in a while. Like it's just, we're not talking about like being perfect. We're talking about most of the time doing more of the effective things and doing less of the ineffective things. Right. And at a minimum, recognizing and understanding the difference between the two.
And I think there is great beauty when parents not only can do that and recognize they're not going to be perfect in it, but even if they're not, point it out and address that and say, I didn't handle that well. I lost, and I've so done this with my kids. I'm sorry, guys. I lost my temper. and I reacted regardless of whether or not it was warranted. I didn't act in a way that was the most respectful for you, and I'm sorry for that. And to have parents be able to explain when they mess up is another reminder and opportunity for us to better connect with our kids, to give them those tools, and also to, reinforce that we're not on a pedestal either. We're learning and growing with them, which can obviously create better connections.
Yeah, exactly. Modeling as a parent, modeling how to apologize for something, modeling how to say, I've made a mistake and I want to make it right. And that can even include, in the heat of the moment, giving a consequence that, as you think about it, like, oh no, grounding them for a month wasn't the right thing. You can go back to them and explain, look, in the heat of the moment, I shouldn't have done this. I gave a consequence. It's not the appropriate. You're still going to get one, but we're going to use one that's more effective. You're not grounded for a month.
Oh, that's a joke in our household, because my husband, in the heat of the moment, one of his outcries for the family is no more sugar. Ever. And I mean, even in the moment, it kind of jarred all of us. Like, okay, the reality is this is not going to happen.
You can't do that. Yeah,
right. We got to be realistic with it. Okay. I know that we could go on for hours and hours, and I have one more thing I want to address with you before we wrap it up here. And that is the fact that all of this is well and good for us to be able to course correct and get on the same tabs as our children, as long as we're the only ones influencing them. However, the older they get, the more they are gone doing other things. Maybe they are completely immersed in school and extracurricular activities, and they're being impacted. Or, and this is a biggie also, you're in a blended family and you have got a step parent, or you've got the other parent that does not align with what you are doing. How do you still stay consistent and strong for your child while recognizing that there are a lot of other people that are letting them do whatever?
So in particular, the blended family example, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's one of the most difficult situations for parents. And the best case scenario is still not great all the time. What you can do is make it way better than it currently is. And it actually includes, even in non-blended, even in a two-parent family where the parents are not on the same page. We have a program called Two Parents, One Plan. It's how do you deal with the fact when parents are not on the same page? But in a blended family, it's even more difficult where you have the child may be living at two different households under two different worlds, two different sets of rules. And first of all, we put a disclaimer in front of all of this. If there's abuse or something else going on in that other household, something that's illegal or abuse or whatever, like, you need to get in touch with the proper authorities to deal with that. But what we're dealing more commonly is their rules don't match what your values are in that household. And one of the first things we say to parents, you don't make, and you have to understand this. You don't make the rules in that household, and they don't make the rules in your household. You have to come to terms with that. Otherwise, you're going to focus all your energies on something over which you can't control, which is the rules in that household. You can only control the rules in your household. You need to be very clear with your child about that. And the other thing, and focus on the rules in your household, and understand that it is a challenge when things are happening over in the other household, but they don't get to say either. So there's a whole bunch of strategies, especially around transition time. It's especially difficult when the child's coming from one house to the other. And there's that sort of transition time. But parents just need to understand they don't control the rules in that household. And you just be very firm with your child. Like, when you're in this household, these are the rules. I don't care what's happening at dad's household. He makes the rules there. I don't have control over that. But when you're here, this is how you talk to me. This is how, we don't swear at each other. You don't hit your sister. The other thing I want to point out, especially in the blended families, and this goes back to something we talked about earlier, there's a lot of guilt going on. And just like we said, don't blame yourself for your child's behavior, because you need to hold, when your child is acting abusive and acting out and not treating people well because they're frustrated or whatever else is going on. That's not an excuse for them to treat other people badly, including mom and dad or their brother or sister. And don't blame yourself for that. You want the accountability on your child. Likewise, if you've got a child with behavior problems, like real behavior problems, do not blame your co-parent for their problems, because they'll pick up on that And again, your child's the only one that can solve these problems. And if you're blaming your ex for your child's behavior, you've given your child an out. You're actually undermining your own child's ability to fix their problems, because now they believe that the reason they're acting out and having problems and having all these issues is because of the other parent. So you want to keep the accountability. Even if you don't like what's going on at the household and you think what they're doing is ineffective, you need your child to understand that they're the ones who are in control of their behavior. So you don't want to blame your co-parent for your child's behavior. You want to keep it on your child as best you can, and focus on the rules within your household as best you can. And what's happening in the other household, very often it's not ideal. The best case scenario is you have a good relationship with your ex. If you can foster that relationship, whatever it takes to foster that relationship, if you can get past whatever issues you had for the sake of your child, like, you should try to do that for your child if you can. And we point out to parents in that situation, look, a lot of times the parents, and this is actually a reasonable case, good case scenario. The parents both agree the child has a behavior problem. At least they have the same goals in mind, which is that they want their child's behavior problem to be fixed. They want the child to get better grades. They want the child to stop getting in trouble at school. They may disagree with the approach, but at least if they're on the same page about where that child is and that they have the same goal in mind, then you've got a chance. You've got a chance to rectify and somehow work it out. And there's some techniques around that. But anyway, that's sort of our initial thing that we talk to parents that are in these homes. And the key, just to reiterate, the key is you don't make the rules in the other house. And if you spend all your time worrying about that, it's just not effective, because you don't have control over that. And the other one is don't focus on your household. And the other one is don't blame your ex for your child's behavior. If your child's yelling and swearing at you, don't blame your ex, blame your child.
And that right there, I think, is the best solution for either blended family, or you take that same approach for the influences at school and everything else. You're not saying you can't talk to anybody else who's going to pressure you wrong or do something wrong. It's, are you taking responsibility for your actions?
Yeah. Are
you, my child, stepping up for the fact that you are paying the consequences for the way you are acting? It's not about all of the other people. And that's definitely a big shift, because I know a lot of parents, there is the desire to, recognizing, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around. If that's the concept, then there is that desire to only have our kids hang around the right people. But the truth is, as our children grow in their independence, they are going to be impacted, influenced by lots of people that we are not necessarily going to align with. So that reminder of shifting the responsibility to our children and showing up as their accountability partner, as opposed to the one that has to steward it all. Not only, I hope, is freeing for parents, but it also is so critical for your child's independence and ability to move beyond you and live on their own ever.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And by coaching and giving your child the tools, and you do that by they learn by being held accountable through their childhood, how to deal with that puts them in the best position possible to deal with influences that are not ideal. And they're most likely gonna
them. Yeah.
So
I love that. All right.
None of this is easy. Parenting's hard.
Parenting is hard, but it
really
doesn't have to be drudgery and hating it. And the more you're willing to show up, be aware, and actually work with your child, then the more enjoyable it can be in the process. For sure. Yeah, we don't want to just muscle through, because like it or not, parenting is also lifelong. And just because they leave our house doesn't mean that these issues may stop. And so this is something that, definitely going on into adulthood and then even further beyond, as we start to shift, and our children may start being the ones to parent us in our old age. This is a lifelong relationship. So we might as well get as diligent and intentional on creating a beautiful one, so that we do enjoy the process.
I couldn't agree more.
All right. So let's hear how anybody can find out more about you, and also just any last words of advice, any last tips that you have for our audience.
So we're at the website's empoweringparents.com. And we're also on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to just search for Empowering Parents, you'll find us. And what I recommend is you come to our website. We have hundreds of free articles. Just sign up for our newsletter and you'll get 2 or 3 emails a week highlighting one of our articles. And within, and in those emails also, we will highlight the Total Transformation Program and the other programs that we have, which is really, when you're dealing with a child that you're at your wit's end and you're having a lot of troubles with, you kind of need a comprehensive approach. It's not just one thing that's going to solve the problem. You need to like take a comprehensive approach on how you talk to them, how you deal with them, how your interactions with those childs go, and you can really turn these things around. And then the last thing I'd want to leave with parents is this is what I usually leave with parents is don't take your child's behavior personally, especially when your child swears at you, yells at you. One of our most common popular articles is, "I hate you, Mom. I wish you were dead." Our kids sometimes say terrible things to us, and we urge parents, view it as a behavior problem. Don't take it personally, because if you take it personally, you're going to have a much more difficult time reacting calmly and effectively to that behavior problem. And then also, and this is critical, if you take it personally, it's going to be that much more difficult for you to offer your child grace and forgiveness when they inevitably turn things around. And you don't want to have that held over them. You don't want to, as your child learns how to solve problems better and doesn't resort to telling you that they hate you, they wish you were dead, and they start behaving better, you don't want to hold that inside and hold that against them. It's going to hurt your relationship with your child. So don't take their behavior personally, view it as a behavior problem.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing these. There's so many nuggets of wisdom. I'm looking forward to actually listening to this again and digesting it as I blog out some of these key points that you have and put it in the blog that'll go along with this. So thank you for your time. Again, parenting is hard, but it doesn't have to be horrible. We can actually really create some amazing relationships with our children that can last throughout the years into adulthood and beyond. So take to heart the points that Kimball has laid out today. Check out empoweringparents.com. I love getting great articles to help me along as well. And also checking out those programs if you have a child that really needs to, you really do need some extra support for. So as always, we celebrate all of the different ways that we approach life. And the more that we can take that time to clearly communicate with one another, set those good boundaries, and really seek to understand one another, the more we can celebrate how the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Namaste. Thank you, Kimball.
Namaste.